Hey guys, welcome to a new movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Venom film, Venom 2 Let There Be Carnage. This film did come out about a week ago. I'm a little bit late to the ball game on this one. I just returned to work recently from a medical leave and things like that, so there's just a lot of stuff regarding all that I had to deal with around the time this film was first released in theaters. So it took me about a good solid week after the fact for me to get around to seeing this one. So I apologize for the late timing with this review. But in Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage, it does pick up relatively quickly after the first film. Eddie Brock is trying to do a story on a guy that's on death row, and he's just trying to kind of get back into the journalism business again. Um, and basically, he does eventually meet this guy before going into his execution, and the interaction gets very violent, and Eddie unfortunately doesn't get much of a story out of it, and he's kind of trying to retrace his steps with journalism and kind of trying to find a way to get back into journalism again and still have Venom in his life and kind of just get his life back on track after the chaotic events of the first Venom movie. And so after a long passing of time, Eddie finds out that this man on death row um, also has a connection to a symbiote as well. And basically, this guy later becomes the character of Carnage that is related to Venom in the Spider-Man stories. And throughout the course of this film, Eddie and Venom are trying to figure out how to get rid of Carnage, how to get rid of all this madness that he started. And since Carnage is now on the loose and no longer on death row due to his escape, they're trying to figure out ways to get rid of Carnage once and for all, use the things that Venom is weak against, such as sound and fire, and use that to their advantage to take out the Carnage character that is now on the loose. But overall, guys, believe it or not, I actually enjoyed Venom 2 even more so than the first film. The first film for me was enjoyable. It's kind of an okay film. There's definitely a lot of problems with that first Venom movie. I do agree with Sony's decision to go with a different director this time. I believe Tom Hardy had more of a voice in the screenplay this time as well. And I think both decisions to do that creatively behind the scenes, I think benefited the sequel quite a bit. Rather than just being a film about Venom and Carnage fighting each other, because they did land Andy Serkis in the director's chair in this movie, we did get more energy and visual flair to the franchise that I don't think, no offense to Ruben Fleischer, who directed the first Venom movie, I don't think we would have gotten quite that visual flair or energy that Andy Serkis managed to bring to this movie that the first film kind of lacked a little bit. Um, this film also does a good job of um, kind of avoiding that cheesy symbiote going from person to person kind of zombie effect thing. They do drop that a little bit in this movie. They do have, of course, they have scenes where symbiotes go from host to host and don't really, keep anybody for a little while as a host, besides the exception of Eddie Brock as Venom and the character of Carnage. Um, but there is a lot of things in this movie that I think really are a huge improvement upon that first Venom movie, therefore making a much more enjoyable sequel to this franchise. But overall, I'm going to give Venom 2 for my positives and negatives. Like I said, first and foremost, we really have to acknowledge that Andy Serkis's energy and visual flair to this movie really helped this film a lot. There's actually a scene that's probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie where Venom is trying to show Eddie something through a visual piece of paper and kind of get all his thoughts down on paper. And what they do is, since Venom can control Eddie at any time he needs to, he basically uses Eddie's hands with some Sharpies and draws out all these things on a piece of paper that Venom is thinking about. He also, when Eddie is on a computer and Venom wants to voice his thoughts on things, he has a way with his symbiote ability to kind of take over Eddie's hands and kind of type it out on the computer himself and things like that. So there's a lot of visual and creative decisions like that that I think make Venom 2 a much more enjoyable experience than the first movie. In the first movie, it was more about Eddie kind of battling this symbiote and him kind of deciding if he's going to settle with the symbiote being in his body or not. And with this movie, there's just so much more creative fluidity to it and more energetic and visual expression to it that just make it a much more enjoyable sequel and a much more enjoyable story overall. Huge thumbs up to Andy Serkis again. I really think he, for being this great motion capture artist and actor that we all know him for, he really does bring a lot of those things that he has as an actor and a motion capture artist to the director chair, making a much more enjoyable sequel as a result. Won't get into detail specifically for those who haven't seen the movie. There is a post-credit scene here where, if you're kind of curious to see where the future of Sony and Spider-Man is going to go, I think this end credit scene really kind of gives you some more detail on that. So make sure you stay for the post-credit scene. Do not leave the theater when the credits start rolling. There is more enjoyable things to be had after the credits start rolling for this movie, as there are for most Marvel films. I also thought Eddie and Venom's bromance, per se, their bromance in this movie, was explored some more, and it was explored some more in a very efficient, effective ways. I like how they explored it in a more comedic way. They explored some things where Eddie and Venom were not getting along, and what they do kind of when they weren't getting along, and things that happen between Eddie and Venom when they're not getting along, and what happens when they do get along, and when Venom tries other hosts and it's not working out very well. So there's a lot of ideas that are explored here of Eddie and Venom kind of needing each other to survive. There's parts of their life that were better without each other, but also as a result, there's parts of their lives that are better as a result by being with each other as well. I also thought for the character of Carnage, I kind of liked how this guy that was on death row kind of had a wacky and kind of gross quality to him. He's one of those characters where you just kind of don't want to touch him just because he is kind of a gross character to begin with. So I liked how Woody Harrelson, who played Carnage in this, really kind of had both a wacky and a gross side to his personality playing this character. And for the most part, it's pretty efficient. I think like a lot of people, though, as a big Venom and Spider-Man fan, there was always these rumors over the years of Jim Carrey potentially playing Carnage at one point. There is a part of me that is kind of curious to see what his version of Carnage would have ever looked like if he was ever given the opportunity to play Carnage in a movie. But I thought Woody Harrelson here, for what he had to do, was pretty effective as the character. He brought both a wacky and a gross quality to the Carnage character that's pretty effective for the most part of what Carnage is like in the comics and so forth. And like I mentioned before, the film does have a very dark sense of humor. I also think it's a very effective dark sense of humor. I think they took kind of the things that were working in the first Venom, because not all of it worked, because keep in mind, I didn't think the first Venom film was a spectacular movie or anything, but there's certainly aspects about it that were effective and did work that they definitely kind of took with a grain of salt while making the sequel and things like that. But I thought the film's sense of humor, it was kind of dark in all the right ways that you would want for a Venom movie. So I thought Andy Serkis brought a very effective, dark sense of humor to the film that does work very well for the most part here. For my negatives of Venom 2, though, the third act of this film, unfortunately, is very clumsy. I do feel like it's trying to do too much at once. They're trying to wrap up the whole Venom and Carnage thing. They're trying to wrap up some love story thing that I'm going to get here to in a second, too, with Carnage and this girl named Shriek, I think her name is. There's just so much going on in that third act, and they're trying to do it all in this church setting. It makes sense for why they're in a church when they eventually get there, but I feel like the second we kind of enter that church with Venom and Carnage, there's just a lot of things they're trying to pull off all at once, and a lot of subplots they're trying to kind of wrap up all at once. It just feels kind of clumsy overall as a result, unfortunately. And then going back to kind of what I was saying earlier with why they were at a church, I didn't like the idea of Carnage having a love interest in this. As far as I remember, I don't remember him having a love interest in the comics or the TV shows or any other kind of Spider-Man spin-off that's happened over the years that has Carnage in it. I just remember Carnage being kind of this evil, malicious character that's kind of on his own mission. So I thought the idea of giving him a love interest here was it's a little forced, and it doesn't really strike me as something that Carnage would have pursued in like a Spider-Man comic book or Spider-Man TV show or anything like that. It's just not something I could see the character of Carnage necessarily pursuing the way that they chose to pursue it here in the movie. Michelle Williams, who was in the first film, who played Eddie Brock's ex-love interest, she has a role in this movie and she's very good. But when I bring up my negatives for this, though, is they also bring back kind of her boyfriend slash fiance that she's been seeing after her and Eddie broke up. And they try to kind of keep that character consistent in this movie, as you know, for being a sequel and everything. Really, all the boyfriend slash fiance does for Michelle Williams in this movie is just kind of create awkwardness still between him and Eddie. I really thought his character was, they were just kind of trying to find ways to continue the character, and it just really didn't work. I really felt like the sequel really didn't need this character necessarily, because in the first Venom movie, they were trying, you know, he's this character who works at a hospital and they're trying to figure out how to get the symbiote out of Eddie and things like that. This time around, I feel like they're just kind of struggling to find ways to keep him into the story and find a way to keep him existing within the story. So for the most part, I thought the boyfriend character they really didn't need here. It was just kind of a worthless use of a character from the first film that kind of honestly didn't really need to be in this movie overall. There's also two chickens in the movie that Eddie and Venom keep as pets, quote unquote. And I guess the joke is Venom likes to eat chickens alive. And so there's these two chickens that they keep around the apartment that are brothers or friends or something like that. And every time they try to use this as a joke, I thought it was just kind of stupid and not very funny. So I thought the whole two chickens thing, whenever they bring it up, because they bring it up quite a bit as humor in this movie, I thought that joke in particular was a very pointless running gag that really wasn't that funny to begin with, unfortunately. Another thing with this movie too is I really would have liked to have seen more time with Eddie getting back into journalism. Really, besides the whole interviewing Carnage thing while he's on death row, that's really about the closest we get to a story about Eddie getting back into journalism after the events of the first Venom movie. And that's really too bad because that's a big part of Eddie Brock's personality is him pursuing a life of a journalist. Something about that character I think really needs to be pursued with a journalism perspective. And unfortunately, Venom 2 doesn't spend a lot of time with that, unfortunately. But overall, I'm going to give Venom 2 Let There Be Carnage an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a very good movie. I think Andy Serkis's energy and visual flair that he brought to this movie was very, very effective and benefited the film overall for sure, rather than just hiring Ruben Fleischer again to do another Venom movie. But like I said, the third act is very clumsy. I didn't really buy into Carnage having a love interest. I thought the Michelle Williams boyfriend character from the first film really didn't need to be in here. They find useful things for her character, but not for his character necessarily. The two chicken jokes really got thin after a while, and I really would have liked to see more of a story involving Eddie Brock getting back into journalism. So 8.5 out of 10 for me. I really enjoyed Venom Let There Be Carnage. Go into this knowing that this isn't a perfect film, but also go into this film knowing that I think everything they did here is a huge improvement over that first Venom movie. And I think Venom and Spider-Man fans are going to be happy with this movie overall. 8.5 out of 10 for me. I do recommend the movie.